The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. 12 present. You have quorum.
A quorum being present, we will be led in opening reflection and prayer by Reverend Kathleen Wilder, pastor of Lafayette Park, United Methodist.
Good morning. Let us center our hearts and minds and souls. Holy One, giver of life and love and hope, we give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for the people in this room who are committed to building a healthy and strong city, one that makes your heart dance with joy. We ask that you pull away distractions that might divide us, and that your spirit of unity comes and helps us have a clear vision on how to heal our city and build our city, that we may be known as the gateway to life. We pray for wisdom and knowledge and courage and strength to do all these things. In all the names we call you, we lift up and celebrate your love. Amen.
We will dispense with the regular order of business to take up the courtesy resolution calendar. Alderwoman from the 11th, you may approach the dais for the presentation of Resolution 210.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I am very excited this morning to have the men of Alpha Phi Alpha with us. If you will please join me here at the dais. All righty. Thank you, gentlemen. We're just about in place. Madam Clerk, if I could get you to please read the summary.
Resolution 210, honoring the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. Whereas Alpha Phi Alpha, the first intercollegiate Greek letter fraternity established for African American men, was founded at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York on December 4th, 1906. Whereas the fraternity initially served as a study and support group for the minority students who faced racial prejudice at Cornell University. The Seven College, who recognized the need for a strong bond of brotherhood among African descendants in this country, the visionary leaders known as the Jewels of the fraternity succeeded in laying a firm foundation. Alpha Phi Alpha's principle of the scholar, fellowship, good character, and the uplifting of humanity. Whereas Alpha Phi Alpha has long stood at the forefront of the African American community's fight for civil rights through leaders such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, W.E.B. Du Bois, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Andrew Young, Paul Robeson, and Lionel Richie, among many others. Whereas the Epsilon Lambda chapter was chartered in St. Louis, Missouri as the 5th graduate chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha on December 3rd, 1919, and served the St. Louis community for over 105 years. The members of Epsilon Epsilon Lambden chapter is the birthplace of two national programs, Life Membership and Housing, and is frequently referred to as the Life Membership chapter due to the efforts of the chapter member, John D. Buckner, in ensuring that the program become a viable, sustainable part of the fraternity. Since being chaptered, Epsilon Lambden has hosted 3 Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity general conventions, 1922, 1933, and 1966. Whereas the chapter members take pride in their continual service to the St. Louis community by focusing on the aims of the fraternity, manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberation to recognize and celebrate the legacy and numerous achievements of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. We further direct the Clerk of the Board of Aldermen to spread a copy of the resolution of the minutes of the proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Introduced this 6th day of December, 2024 by the Honorable Laura Keys, Alderwoman of the 11th Ward, and the co-sponsors include Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard of the 10th Ward.
Good morning again. So I'm bringing greetings to the men of Alpha Phi Alpha from 2 of your brothers, both of which are out of town. And so the 84th District State Representative Dale Taylor sends Happy Founders Day wishes to his fellow brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha. Dale Taylor was initiated into Alpha Phi Alpha in the spring of 1985 during his freshman year at Washington University. Of many fraternal, civic, and social organizations available at WashU, Dale selected Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity because their mission and aid to African American men in graduating from college. One familiar fraternity chant sums up it best. We party hardy, we stay up late, but most of all, we graduate. During his 4 years at WashU, Dale and his fraternity brothers built a cohesion with Black students, hosted booths at 13 carnivals, raised over $10,000 via their annual step show competition, and traveled to several national conventions to advocate for student issues. The crown jewel of Dale's 4 years as an undergrad was competing and winning the Alpha Phi Alpha National Step Show competition. Since graduating, Dale continues to be active with the graduate extension of the fraternity by hosting voter registration drives, organizing rides to the polls, and educating high school students on voting rights. Last year, Dale received his chapter's annual service award for advocating for voting rights. The next person is actually my brother-in-law, Commander Jared Keys Sr., United States Navy, retired, is a life member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, graduating from Cleveland Naval Junior Academy, and has the distinction of being the first commissioned officer to graduate from Cleveland NJROTC High School. He served 21 years of active duty, participating in several combat actions, which included Operation Iraqi Freedom. He played a role in the attack on Saddam Hussein's home city of Kitrik, allowing the city that was captured by the Kurds and the U.S. Marines. He has supported the naval services in his retirement and only recently decided that corporate America was not where he wanted to be anymore. Brother Keys is a 1989 graduate of Hampton University with an undergraduate in management and 1996 graduate of Bowie State University with a Master's of Science in Information Systems. He pledged the graduate chapter Mu Beta Lambda, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in 1992. He has served many roles with the fraternity and include chapter vice president while on active duty. At the behest of his mother, Sorora Ametria Keys, AKA, he took the great step to become a life member. He is also a master mason being raised at H. McGee Alexander Lodge, number 3 in St. Louis. He currently lives in Chesapeake, Virginia with his wife, Soror, aka Hope Quinn Keys, who is also a St. Louis native. They have 3 children, Jared, Haley, and Jeremy, and they also are blessed to have 3 lovely granddaughters, the two of which are from their oldest 2 children. Thank you so much. In addition to that, Dr. Marlene Davis, godmother of the fraternity, sends you happy Founders Day greetings as well. Personally, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here, but for all of the work that you have done to uplift Black men being college educated and going out into the world and making a significant impact on policy across the country, around the world. Delbert will step up to speak.
Chapter President.
There you go.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank everyone for the opportunities for proclamation. I am the chapter president of the Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. My name is Kenneth Nutt. Again, we want to extend thank you and greetings on behalf of the chapter. We are celebrating our Founders Week, so that is really appreciative that we have been recognized on this day. This is a significant week for us, for the founding, both of our chapter in St. Louis and of our national organization. Thank you again. God bless.
Well, thank you so much. We'll turn it back over to our president.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Members of the board, thank you, Alderwoman Keys, for bringing this resolution forward. I was so excited to be a co-sponsor. I'll tell you why. The example that I see you all set in the community, day in and day out, in so many different spaces, has been exemplary and has been able for people to be able to be what they see, right? And so young men, our little Black boys that can look up and see you all standing proud in the community in service, right, is one of the things that I take, I'm most excited about being able to honor you all this way about. The second most exciting thing is that this very desk that I serve from, my grandfather's desk, who I proudly serve under his name, the Clark name, Joseph Clark, Joseph W.B. Clark, Sr., former 4th Ward Alderman, was your brother. And so I feel his spirit today with you all being here and me being able to honor not only him in Essentia, but you all as well. And just know that me in my position, you always have my support 10 toes down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderwoman, do you want to make a motion?
I absolutely would like to make the motion that we pass this resolution in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we make resolution 210 in bank. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That now means that every member of the Board of Aldermen has signed on as a sponsor.
Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to echo my colleagues' thanks to the Alderwoman of the 11th for bringing this resolution, and thank you to all the members of Alpha Phi Alpha for being here today, but also for your contributions to the community in St. Louis and beyond. We are better for your service, so thank you.
Alderman from the 14th. Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Also echo the sentiments from the Alderwoman 6 and the Alderwoman from the 10th for making this in bank. I just want to thank all you gentlemen up there for the amazing work that you all do, and especially not just the leadership you display in the neighborhood, but being able to have young Black men be able to look up to other strong Black men that's doing great work in our community. So just thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you guys are doing to move our city forward. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
I don't want to be a broken record. I wasn't going to get up, but I guess my uncle was watching this. Remember, he was, I know you're not going to stay in your seat. So absolutely, I'm going to get up. Thank you all for all of you all's contributions, for all of the work that you have done for our community, your strong focus on service and really giving back. And thank you for the model that you set for others in our community. And thank you to the Alderwoman for sponsoring.
Yes, thank you so much for all of your work and commitment to St. Louis. At this time, I want to invite everybody over to the stairs here if we want to line up and all get a picture together. Go right ahead. I stand in the back. Oh. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yay. Lovely. Thank you. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolutions consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. We adopt the courtesy resolutions consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Today I have two guests that I would like to introduce. One is Mr. Gentry Trotter with Heat Up St. Louis. The work that they're doing, especially in times of need when it's holiday time and also the weather is dropping, to make sure people Amerenville and Spire stay on, is just amazing. I know they'll be coming up next year on their 25th anniversary for Rise and Shine. So I know he's watching. I just want to thank him for the great work that he does for Heat Up St. Louis. If you need utility assistance, you can go to heatupstlouis.org to be able to get that assistance. And then my other guests, I think eventually they're going to come in. So when they do come in, if the body all can look up and just wave at them. We have a lot of young kids from Lift to Life Academy, which is in the 8th Ward. We'll be coming in to talk to some alders and just see the work that we do here. So when they do get here, they're not here yet. If everybody can just look up and start waving at them, we'll greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Madam President.
Alderwoman from the 1st?
Ann?
No. Okay. Any further introduction of honored guests? Seeing none. Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the approval of the minutes from Friday, November 22nd, 2024.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'm sorry, I got excited because he said he actually knew my grandfather and served with him. So I move that we approve the minutes from Friday, November 22nd, 2024.
Second.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we approve the minutes from Friday, November 22nd, 2024. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in A, B, C, and D of the agenda and has been placed in the Google Drive for your review. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individual for appointment to the Loughborough Commons Community Improvement District. The appointment of Joshua Kuhn, who resides in House Springs. I respectfully request your approval of this appointment. Sincerely, to Shara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointment to the Loughborough Commons Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move to accept the appointment of Joshua Kuhn to the Loughborough District.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the Loughborough Commons Community Improvement District. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Commissioners of the Housing Authority of St. Louis. The reappointment of Regina Fowler, the reappointment of Saladin Martinez, the reappointment of Castino Ocho, the appointment of Dara Estridge, and the appointment of Rachel D'Souza. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, to Shara O. Jones, Mayor.
Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointments to the Commissioners of the Housing Authority of St. Louis.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to send all these appointments to the HUD's committee.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we send the mayor's appointments to the St. Louis Housing Authority to the HUD's committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Abstain.
Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Keys. 13 aye votes and 1 abstain.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 14th to send Mayor Jones' appointments to the Housing Authority of St. Louis to the HUD's committee.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
Does anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off of any of our informal calendar? Anyone wish to take any bills or resolutions off any of our informal calendars? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I know this is not the time, but if the board can make the young kids from Lift to Life in the gallery feel welcome by just
First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 140, sponsored by Alderman Browning, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of one or more series of tax increment revenue bonds, including the RPA 4 tax increment revenue notes, St. Louis Innovation District project, in an aggregated principal amount not to exceed $4 million plus cost of issuance, approving a third amendment to the amended and restated redevelopment agreement containing a severability clause. Board Bill 141, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller of the city of St. Louis on behalf of the city to enter into and execute an agreement or agreements with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control, being offered pursuant to federal fiscal year 2024 notice of funding availability for the Lead Hazard Reduction Demonstration Grant Program, directing the comptroller to issue warrants thereon upon the city treasury containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of first reading of board bills.
Reference to committee of board bills.
To the HUD's committee, Board Bill 131, 140, and 141. That's the extent of reference to committee of board bills.
Second reading and report of standing committees.
The following board bills were reported out of Transportation and Commerce with the due pass recommendation. Board Bill 132, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis owner and operator of St. Louis Lambert International Airport, to enter into and execute the First Amendment to the West and East Substation Lease Agreement with the Union Electric, doing business as Ameren, Missouri, which originally authorized ordinance number 69920, approved January the 15th, 2015, containing a severability clause. Board Bill 136, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance recommended by the Airport Commission, the Comptroller, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making findings respecting the transfer of the maximum of $13,727,769 of excess monies that the City of St. Louis intends to transfer from the Debt Service Stabilization Fund to the Airport Revenue Fund during fiscal year 2025, containing a severability clause. The following board bill was reported out of Legislation and Rules Committee with the due pass recommendation. Board Bill 137, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, President Green, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. An ordinance establishing a municipal identification card program in the City of St. Louis to provide all residents access to a reorganized form of government-issued photo identification. That's the extent of second reading report of standing committees.
Report of special committees.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 15, board bills for perfection consent.
Board Bill 125, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, President Green, Alderman Aldridge, Alderman Browning, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderwoman Sanye. An ordinance requiring property owners to prevent and remediate mold in rental dwelling units, prohibiting an owner of a rental dwelling unit from obtaining a certificate of inspection if mold is present, providing for notice protocols to owners of unit where mold is found, requiring owners to notify tenants of units where mold is found, directing the Department of Health to create materials with information about mold prevention, remediation, and hazards, empowering the Building Division to enforce this ordinance, imposing penalties for violating this ordinance, providing for an effective date, containing an emergency clause and a severability clause. So noted. Board Bill 133, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Keys, and Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, of the City of St. Louis, establishing multiple public works and improvement projects on the Laurel and Waterman Bridge, traffic management enhancement on South Broadway and North Broadway, River de Pere Boulevard, bus stop upgrades on Grand, Delmar, and Cass within the City of St. Louis, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 134, as amended, sponsored by Alderman Aldridge and Alderwoman Keys, pursuant to ordinance number 68937, the proposed bill authorizing honorary street name Pastor C.D. Wells Way, which shall begin at the intersection of Palm Street and Jefferson Avenue to the intersection of Heber Street and Jefferson Avenue. That's the extent of board bills for a perfection consent calendar.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I request that Board Bill 125 be taken off the consent calendar, please.
And where would you like it placed?
It goes to the regular perfection. It's not my bill. I just wanted to take it off the consent.
Madam Clerk, if you could please make note of that.
So noted.
It's been Alderwoman from the 10th. You are recognized on the motion to adopt the board bills for the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the board bills for perfection consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt the board bills for the perfection consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 126, as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard and President Green. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, amending ordinance number 71393, 71494, 71554, 71555, 71591, 71592, 71650, 71841, and ordinance number 71864 by reappropriating certain amounts specified herein in an aggregated amount of $8,909,998.58 for other purposes, containing an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we perfect Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill number 126 as amended in committee. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you so much, Madam President. Board Bill 126 had two very extensive hearings in HUDs, one on November 12th, one on November 19th, both of them almost in excess of 4 hours. One was actually a little over. And it unanimously passed out of ENA on November the 20th. When we ask why we want to have these unencumbered or necessarily needed to be reprogrammed funds into the 911 dispatch center, I want to make sure we're clear that that's where these funds are going, to PSAP, our public safety access point. We know that that will continue to decrease 911 response times and improve the emergency response in our city. The construction is already underway, and these funds will now be able to meet the Treasury deadlines. The total cost was about $45 million, and the city has $32.76 million from several resources, along with a $10 million state appropriation. So Board Bill 126 will bring the total funding up to a little over $41 million, so that's 90% of the estimated total cost, and the remaining costs we are still working on. The contractor, KW, is currently securing the site and setting up for construction, and construction is planned to begin in January of next year, just a month away, with hopefully a completion date around or in the fourth quarter of 2026. So again, this bill allocates the funds that we heard from in those two meetings. Every department head that showed up, I thank you for taking the time. We don't take your time for granted. So being here in those long HUDs meetings, us showing up and then you showing up and telling us, hey, the spirit was there, the will was there, but we are not going to be able to spend this money in the amount of time. So we are now putting that money into a place where we know that it can get spent, which is our public safety access. And with that, I'll yield for questions from some of my colleagues. Thank you.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President. It's on my end. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I rise in support of this bill. In public safety, the committee that I chair, we've had many discussions on regarding 911 and the amount of time that it has taken to answer calls to 911. And that response time is getting better. The calls are getting picked up faster. We are hiring on more dispatchers. And this is another important piece of the puzzle, this bill, in making sure that when anyone in our city calls 911, that the call gets answered and that the resources get sent to the appropriate place as fast as possible. No one's calling 911 just to chat. People are calling 911 because they're in some of the scariest or darkest times in their lives. And this bill will help all of our first responders get to people as fast as possible and to help them out. I move that we make Board Bill 126 as amended in committee in bank.
It's been moved by the Alderman
Objection.
from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th. There's been an objection to making Board Bill 126 as amended in committee in bank. So if members would like to add their name as a co-sponsor, you may.
Then I would like to add my name as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Please add the Alderman from the 3rd as a co-sponsor, and the Alderwoman from the 1st as a co-sponsor, and Alderman from the 9th and the 6th and the 7th and the 14th and the 11th, all as co-sponsors.
Madam President, just to make sure I got everyone covered, that was Alderman from the 1st, Alderman from the 3rd, Alderwoman from the 1st, Alderman from the 9th, Alderwoman from the 6th, Alderwoman from the 7th, Alderwoman from the 11th, and and Alderman from the 14th.
Correct. I believe that is all.
Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes, Madam President, members of the board, I rise in opposition, especially to the thing, the statement about good intentions. The intentions were good, but the implementation of carrying out many of these things were not the way they were supposed to. And people asked about what was going on over and over and over and over again and met with silence and disappointing results, or we're going to get to it or something else. But at the end of the day, if you just allow the current administration to sit on money for years and then all of a sudden now we got some other place to put that money, I want to know, where is that money going to be replaced from? Are we going to take the Rams money and replace this money? I am not supporting it. I do support a 911 center. I do not support money being taken from North St. Louis and going into a 911 center because we didn't get it. In case any of you all don't ever drive Kings Highway, please, please take a chance to drive Kings Highway, North Kings Highway, and then North Kings Highway Memorial Boulevard, which is different than North Kings Highway. And there you'll see what happens when people sit on money until the last minute and then come out and halfway do the project. I have gotten 50 emails, probably so many yells and screams about North Kings Highway Memorial Boulevard because that money was set on for a long time. It was not done the way it's supposed to be done, was not implemented correctly. And then when you finally come and do it at the last minute, it is like getting on a roller coaster, and each lane that you drive in is so messed up that it is impossible to drive straight almost. It is the most ridiculous jackleg piece of work I've ever seen in the city in all the 30-something years I've been here. So when we say about the good intentions, I can agree with the good intentions, but the intention to actually get the job done, I do not agree with it. I'm not going to vote for moving money out of my community when it was set upon for years and people asked about it, what's going on. So I don't agree with that. So I am sorry that we didn't spend this money. I am very sorry we didn't spend this money because the intentions were good and the people who worked on it had good intentions. And so I don't care if everybody else thinks this is a great idea. I think this is a reflection upon the administration's ability not to get things done in North St. Louis, or purposefully not to get things done in North St. Louis, or purposely to half but do them. I don't want to say the word that I want to say. And that is what is happening. If any of you all don't understand what I'm saying, please drive Kings Highway and then you will understand. And so the things that have not gotten done is not because they couldn't have got done with the will and people doing stuff. It's because they weren't intending to do it. And now we need to spend this money. And so now we got this, we can do the 911, but nobody said, how do we put this money back? Because if the intentions were good, we would be talking about putting this money back from another source. Because no, I don't want to lose the money, but I don't want us not to do the things that we're supposed to do in my part of the community. And that's what I find happening over and over as I have asked for reports about money that was spent on bridges. You come up with a couple of $100 million that was spent on bridges and only $2 million in North St. Louis. All kind of reports like that are all over. So I will not be voting for this. You cannot put it in bank. I will say that the administration should have been coming up with saying, we got to spend it, but here's how we're going to put this money back and we're going to get these things done. And there's never seems to be the intent is to get anything done in North St. Louis. And I think that in a couple of months, we will hear that at the election of how disappointed the people are in North St. Louis, because I hear it every single day. I have people calling me from out in the county about Kings Highway Memorial Boulevard. Like, Sharon, do you see Kings Highway? I cannot not see it. I live one house away from it. I cannot not understand that it was the most unprofessional job. I wrote emails already. I've written a letter to the mayor's office saying this is how, don't come and repave it again in December, that we need to wait and do it correctly. And a lot of what's done is that we hold on to things until the last minute and then we don't get it done. And then we got another place conveniently that we can put it. And so I do not accept that we take this money without replacing it. And 911 is a good cause. And so were the causes that we had in here. And for that reason, I'm going to be voting no. And I'm going to ask that, since everybody who's talking about what a great thing this is, that they ask the mayor's office to put the money back from someplace else. Good thing we got a nice amount of money sitting up there with the Rams money, that'll be a great place to move it, because that was not, if it was good intentions, and I'm looking at who passed it, it sure was not good execution. And for these reasons, I will be voting no. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you. I just wanted to look at the person who passed it and make sure I thank the Alderwoman.
Alderwoman, can you speak a little bit more into the microphone?
Sorry, I just wanted to thank the Alderwoman from the 10th for all of the due diligence and good explanation that we had in committee. I wanted to make sure too that I just uplift one of the top complaints that I think any constituent of mine has is absolutely the response times to 911. And I really thank the administration for doing what we need to be done. And if the governor does not give us what we need, which is quite common in the city of St. Louis, I'm glad that we found the funds to put all of our first responders in the same building. And I look forward to the additional things that we do to make sure that our city workers, we're able to have them, retain them, give them the support, and give our constituents the work that they did. So I just wanted to make sure that I publicly on the record thank the administration, made it clear that I look forward to the city, like anything that we can do to make sure that when our residents have emergencies. I had a resident who was robbed, her home was burglarized, she was held at gunpoint, and she had a couple of hours of wait time. And I can name several other incidences that have happened with constituents, whether it's, they were raped or sexually assaulted, all these interactions that require police departments, or even smaller incidences, and the response time is really low. And so I'm just glad that we're moving in that direction. And I wanted to make sure that I said that on the record and thank the Alderwoman from the 10th for all of her work, and the mayor's office and the police department and the many folks who came and talked to us and who helped even facilitate a bill signing where state legislators and other officials, many of us went and made sure that we showed our support for this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, would the Alderwoman from the 10th yield?
The Alderwoman from the 10th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 8th.
Absolutely.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Alderwoman, I was just hoping that you could maybe go through some of the items that we're reappropriating. I know you spent an extensive amount of time in the HUD's committee kind of for the benefit of the general public and those of us who aren't on the committee. If you could just help us understand why some of these funds are being moved, what programs weren't able to be funded as originally intended, and in particular, Exhibit A is what I'm kind of referring to, those reappropriations. It would be helpful.
Can you speak on which 3 appropriations you want me to speak on?
The reappropriations as itemized in Exhibit A.
And what are they?
Exhibit A in your board bill are on pages 8 and pages 9.
I know that. I know that, but I'm asking you, since you came to me and asked me for specific things, I thought you had some specific questions. We know that when we moved this money, it didn't move out in anybody's specific community. Several departments, as I spoke of earlier, came and spoke about how they had programs, again, goodwill and good-spirited programs that they were not able to take into fruition for a myriad of reasons. For instance, GBI. For instance, child support arrearage. Different programs that they couldn't get spent. A program from my library, from my St. Louis Public Library. So there's several different things. Again, when you talk about something that it took us 8 hours to talk about, I don't want to try to condense it down, but if you have something specific, Alderwoman, then I can speak on that, or I can share with you the information.
Thank you, Alderwoman. There really aren't too many programs here. I think there are about 20. If you wouldn't mind just talking to some of the bigger ticket items. You mentioned a couple, the GBI, the Youth and Juvenile Detention Programming Funding. Just more generally speaking, what some of the reasons were, just for the general public. This is, just wanted to make sure that we're just having a conversation about why some of these funds are moved. It's $8 million. It is a significant amount of funding, and it would just be helpful. I know you, again, went through this in the committee, but given that many of us aren't on the committee, it would be helpful.
Yeah, that's the great thing about our committees. Even when you're not on the committee, you can still participate, especially as. And like we just had this conversation a couple of weeks ago where I said I always send out an email with links, with information to make sure if people have specific questions that even if I couldn't possibly answer, the administration could answer. We know that some of these programs, unfortunately, were caught up in legal cases, which is why we couldn't carry them to fruition. I want to reiterate that this money didn't come out of anybody's community. It didn't come out of anybody's programming that they didn't want to see succeed. It's just a timeline, and these very devoted city workers and department heads came and spoke to us and said, this is the small amount out of the bigger picture that we could not allocate or we would not be able to spend. And so now we are putting it in a very, very important place, very necessary place within our public safety access point. That's it. It's no big gotcha there. It's just that they came to us and said that they, as the department heads, which you as an alder, have every right to call any department head and ask them anything you want to ask them about their billing, about their budget, about how they were or were not being able to do something. And that is what they came and reported to us. And then we have the fiduciary responsibility to then carry it out, and we know where we can spend this, and it will get spent.
Alderwoman, I appreciate your communication on all those hearings, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to tune into most of them. I know I was able to do that because of the wide range of opportunities for the public. But given that not everyone was able to do that, I thought it would be helpful just to kind of go through exactly what we were in here today. So I appreciate you kind of mentioning the legal challenges with some of the programs, identifying that there were some legal hurdles to some of these, and that is why we're moving some of these funds. You mentioned earlier the total cost of the PSAP. I get asked a lot when we're considering funding this, and I agree with the Alderwoman from the 7th and many others who have talked about the importance of getting this work done. Do we have a full accounting of what the PSAP project will cost and where the other funding will come from?
Yeah, I did read that in my opening. Did you need me to read it again?
If you wouldn't mind, that would be helpful. I apologize for missing it.
You are fine. The city has received $32.76 million from the following sources: City Fund of $22.76 million, $115,413 from the Ego Devo Fund, from the 22-23 budget, $2.57 million, again from the Ego Devo Fund, Board Bill 120 in 2023, that's $15 million, ARPA funds. Board Bill 184, 2022, $3.2 million, ARPA and Eco Devo funds. 24-25 budget, $1.87 million, Eco Devo funds. The state contributed I don't know if you can hear, if you're just paying attention. The state contributed $10 million. The state appropriation in the 2024 of the $10 million. This board bill brings the total funding to $41.25 million, which again, I will state is 90% of the estimated cost. The remaining estimated cost is $3.74 million, and I do not have the answer to that question, but again, you can reach out to the administration or I can reach out for you and get an answer on as to where we are hoping and claiming that we will fill in the gap of $3.74 million.
Thank you, that's helpful. The 3.7 was kind of what I was looking for. It's a lot. The total project cost has come down from the last estimate I've seen, so that's helpful information. Alderwoman, I believe you've probably put that, I know that document that you have is probably in the drive. Do you mind just letting us know where, so I can go ahead and do my own due diligence on that particular document?
Yeah, as always, when we're in committee, these are in the committee drive. So the committee hearing that was on 11/12 and 11/19 is in there. Again, I sent you all the links to the committee hearings. So if you don't have the time to sit and go through the drive or the documents yourself, feel free to turn it on and listen in the background. It was a lot of good information. Not only did the department heads come up, but their programming heads came in, spoke. They took the time out. It was dedication that they showed, not just for their service, but for the city of St. Louis. Again, I don't take it for granted, and that's why I hold it important that we show up for them.
Oh, you're right. I appreciate it, and I was able to tune into a good portion of it, and I appreciate you letting me know where those are on the drive. My last question really would just be about the additional, if we expect any additional board bills or work to be done to reappropriate funds. I know according to the city's transparency portal. We still are looking at over $100 million that haven't been programmed as of today, which is December 6th. As we all know, those funds have to be programmed by the end of the year. Before the end of 2024, we risk losing them. Do you know, Alderwoman, if there's going to be additional work needed by the Board of Aldermen to program those additional 100 and some odd million dollars?
Yeah, first of all, if you did watch the hearings, you saw that the number that you just said was not an accurate number. And so I would say for us to follow up on that first. And then I have not been contacted, reached out to, even mumbled about any additional legislation going forward. I know if it comes up, we need to get it done. We do not need to play politics with it. We do not need to go back and forth about it. We need to get it done for our constituents, for the city of St. Louis. I would also like to note that I did receive a message as a result of this conversation that the remaining funds that we are going to try to tap through capital budget or a general obligation bond to be able to get that done, and that came from the administration's office.
Thank you. So to clarify or to reiterate, the transparency portal is incorrect as far as the funds that need to be programmed?
I haven't really, I'm not caught up, and I don't want to speak to what you're looking at over there, but as it relates to us having this conversation right now here today, the number you said is not accurate.
Okay. The number I am stating is coming directly from the city's transparency portal with regards to ARPA. This is directly from the city's website. So if there is another source of data on the programmed funds, I'm hoping that the city will choose to update the transparency portal appropriately so that the general public and other legislators would have access to those funds. If they're incorrect, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. I know that's not on you, Alderwoman, but I will submit a request that updated funds be shared not only with the Board of Alderpersons but the general public, because I can say that I think one of the most prevalent questions I'm receiving at neighborhood meetings is, where's the ARPA money? When are we going to program it? And there's a large amount of, I would say, frustration and concern that we're not getting it done quick, to add to what the from first, the 20th, and the first Alderwoman from the 12th, I believe, was talking about earlier. But again, I appreciate your willingness to answer questions and the long, extensive hearings that you held on the topic earlier this session.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I absolutely agree about the updating of the transparency portal. What I know for sure is that sometimes we have to get past the work that we're doing today for us to be able to update the transparency portal. And I know that even if the transparency portal is not updated technically by that, when you have the voices, the testimonies under, they said they would tell the truth and the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I believe our department heads, our employees here in the city would stand on that, the work that they are doing. The work that they're doing in their departments for our communities, they can show it. They have the data. Again, all of this was shared, and you'll be able to pull it up in that slide deck. But not only that, it was shared, again, through their testimonies in committee. So I get the same calls. I get the same frustrations. I have some of my own frustrations. But what I also know is not to gaslight my community and not to lie to them or mislead them into thinking that something is or is not happening or can or cannot happen. For example, if you tell somebody that any of these projects could have happened overnight, or give them some kind of idea that it could have, that's not being truthful with our people. I say our people because I don't want you to feel like I'm saying you. I'm just saying out in the general public, period. So it's better for us as elected officials in the building of our trust to be able to tell our constituents the truth, to give them the tools, the systems, the processes, educate them so that they can advocate for themselves, even if you or I aren't in position to advocate for them. But having them misled into thinking that something's not being done when we know it's being done, it's not right.
I think you're absolutely right, Alderwoman. I do find it unfortunate that the transparency portal is incorrect and not transparent. That is, in my opinion, the definition of gaslighting. if we're relying on slide decks that the general public doesn't have access to as the definitive piece of information, that's a problem for me as well, especially when we're promoting that the city is being transparent with regards to this historic amount of funding. As far as I'm concerned, the general public should have just as much access to the relevant data as we do, and that's just not the case right now. So with that, I will be submitting a request for the additional $122 million that as of today, as of the transparency portal, is still not programmed, so that we can share with our constituents exactly where.
And thank you. I also reiterate that everything that I've read from stated that was shared in committee that you can watch thanks to our friends at STL TV anytime. You can go back, not even, or view it live via Zoom during the committee hearing is open to the public. They're in drives, and if you can't access it yourself, I encourage you watching to connect with your alderperson, because your alderperson absolutely has access to it, and they can then share it with you. That is what we are called to do. That's what our responsibility is to you all, to the constituents that are watching, is to tell you all the truth.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I first like to address the Alderwoman from the 7th, speaking about all the things that happened with 911. Been going on for a long time. Part of the problem is we don't have enough employees to cover anything. We don't have the police. We don't have enough people in 911. We don't have enough people any place in the city. This has been ongoing for years and years and years. And just because you get 911, I want to tell you, in my part of the city, that doesn't mean you get the police. People call the police over and over and over again. And the Alderwoman from the 13th, and I know this really a lot because we have the 5th and the 6th district, and you don't get response. You don't have enough police there. I'm not blaming the police. You do not have enough police. That woke generation of defund the police instead of saying re-examine the budgets of the police. Well, we've defunded the police and we don't have enough police. And I'm not one to want the police to be in every situation, but the people in my community, when they call, they want somebody to show up, and that's not happening. So having a big, giant 911 center, but nobody to respond to it, be it the police or the fire emergency, is not going to resolve the problem. We need boots on the ground. And then I want to address this thing about things not happening overnight. The ARPA funds came here in 2021. They were appropriated to the city of St. Louis. At the same time that the mayor, the current administration, became the mayor, we got ARPA funds. I will never forget, and for those people who talk about looking at stuff, I'll give it to you and send it to you. On July the 9th, 2021, we appropriated a lot of the ARPA funds then. In fact, we were in the middle of COVID, and we had a 10-hour Zoom meeting, or 10 or 12, I can't even remember how long. The reason why I remember it so well is because it's my mother's 86th birthday. And
point of order, point of order. We can't hear.
Right, if we could please keep our voices down in the chamber. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
It was my mother's 86th birthday, and I was in Decatur, Illinois, trying to celebrate with her. We had an emergency meeting that lasted over 10 hours to appropriate this money. So when someone talks about something happening overnight or just in a few days or months, from July the 9th, or whenever we finally passed it, because we appropriated July the 9th, let's just say, I didn't look up when the board bill, but it got passed in 2021. This is almost 2025. This is not somebody saying, oh, I wanted something to happen overnight. We've waited, we've changed the bill, which I got up when we changed the bill and told everybody that it was a mistake what we were doing. I made a record when we appropriated the money about how the money got appropriated. I know because I was there, as was the current mayor, as was the comptroller, as was the former president of the Board of Aldermen. I made that record. You can go back and look, and I'll pull, since we're talking about looking at history, Good. Let's pull it and look at it. The things that were said about why we had to change this bill is why we're also in trouble. And why we have all this conflict of interest and appearance of impropriety by people who do not know how to have a transparent city government and don't know that they cannot have their family involved in city government getting the funds when they are sitting there. In my 33 years, I have never had my family be involved in getting any kind of city money because I knew better than that. Because even if it wasn't a conflict, which I think it is, I always knew that it was an appearance of impropriety. So we got this money and we passed an ordinance, and then we went about not doing that ordinance and using the excuse that 3 men from our Board of Aldermen got found guilty or pled guilty to indictments and got federal charges and went to jail. That didn't change all the rest of the people that were involved. The comptroller was involved. The current mayor was involved. We at the Board of Aldermen voted for this. I was involved. That didn't make us be part of that. We worked on this, and then we changed it, and it became a mess. It is a big mess. If you go out in the city of St. Louis and talk to people, they are disheartened by our city government and what's going on. I can't go to the grocery store, I can't go to the hardware store, any place else that I'm out eating that somebody wants to come and sit down while I'm eating and say, what is going on with these ARPA funds? What is the problem? What has happened? We do not understand. And we have all these people out here protesting about the unfairness of how it is. And then we talk like, oh, well, why do you want it to happen so? We got people on the floor sitting there talking about yesterday. 2021 and almost 2025 is not yesterday. That's a full term almost. And we have not done the things we were supposed to. And we don't want to listen to anybody else that says, hey, that may not be a good idea. So we are in a quandary. And we just keep pushing ahead anyway, as though we don't know that this is a conflict of interest with much of this stuff is going on and that it was purposefully held up. It was not done on purpose because now I want to change it now that the other people are gone. But we have not gotten anything done. And there were good things that should have occurred, but they didn't occur. And now at the last minute, we're just going to give it to this because we want to blame the people up in Jefferson City. I don't agree with a lot of the things that the people in Jefferson City did, but this was not created by Jefferson City. This was created by the current administration and the current Board of Aldermen. I'm part of it, so I'm part of the problem. Do not try to blame it on the Republicans that control Jefferson City. This is our problem that we created. We had the most funds that we ever have had in my 32 years of being in office, and we have not been able to show that we can spend it. And we want to talk about a transparency portal. That is the least transparent incorrect thing I've ever seen in my life. It has never been correct. Every time somebody challenges it, then we are told, oh, that's not correct. Oh, that's a problem. Oh, that's not correct. It's not correct. Because you don't want transparency. Because we at the Board of Aldermen could have transparency if we wanted. We have subpoena power at this Board of Aldermen. We could subpoena those records. We could put them out ourselves. We don't want it. We want people to do what we want them to do. There is a political agenda here, and we're going to get it done irrespective. And we think that the people of the city of St. Louis do not see what is going on. They see it. They read all the newspaper articles. If you can sit up there and say, oh, that's not a conflict of interest, all you want to, it is a conflict of interest, and it is an appearance of impropriety, and it is not a transparent portal. And then we get somebody to come to stand up and say, well, I just want to thank you for all the work. We're not doing any work. What we're doing is just kicking it down the road, and then at the last minute, we got to hurry up and do that. We're not doing work. We're not doing fair, appropriations of funds. We're not keeping to what we said we were going to do. It is long drawn out, and then hurry up and get it done. And then when somebody challenges it, oh, you're gaslighting. The person who is gaslighting is the person who gets up and says that. The person who doesn't know what they're talking about is the person who's getting up and saying that. Because the general public does understand what we're doing, and we're not doing good government. And we can hide behind, oh, this is a great thing now we're doing at the last minute, but we didn't get the stuff done in the first place. And if it was bad, we ought to be able to stand under scrutiny. We ought to be able to answer all the questions. We should have since we call it a a portal that is transparent. That transparent portal should always be correct. It's not like we are doing addition and subtraction with first graders. We have computers, we have accountants, we have people that computer people. That all these people should have that up to date almost always. It might be a few thousand or even a million off, but it's always wrong. It's never been right since we opened it. That is not good government. That is bad government. And you can keep trying to cover it up and keep coming back with changes. And this is why we got to do this. We have to do it because we're not doing good government. And we want to cover it up, and we want to make anybody who asks any questions be the bad guy. And we want to get up and pontificate and thank people for all the hard work you're doing. Hard work is getting government to work for people. Hard work is making sure that we do what we say we're going to do in a timely fashion. Now, nobody could have thought we would be under a COVID at any time. Nobody had a way to predict that. But we do know how to spend money. And we do know how to get things done if we do them in a way that is inclusive, and that we do it in a way that we don't try to trick people, and we do it in a way that we try to make sure that everybody has access. And we've not done that. We've not done that. We have not done that. In fact, the president refused to sign my subpoena when I was the chair of the streets because I wanted to know where that $500 went, that original one. Not only do we not do it for the general public, we don't want the members of the Board of Aldermen to know stuff. We want to keep that a secret. The treasurer lied for a whole year saying he was going to produce documents that to this day he has not produced. So we're keeping documents that ought to be not only available to the aldermen, because how do we do good government when people are hiding things from us? But then when the people go on to see what we're doing, we can have a transparency portal, and then people get up and say, well, call your alderman. No, call the people who set the transparency portal up and make sure that they have it done right. And if the transparency portal was put up by the mayor, then her people ought to have that right. If it was put up by the president of the Board of Aldermen, then her people should have it right. If it was put up by the comptroller, whoever put that up, don't have people calling the members of the Board of Aldermen as that's our job to give them. It is not. That's why we have a transparency portal. And so they can go search for themselves. They don't have to go through the alderman for that. That is ridiculous. That is a ridiculous statement. Just like when I asked, when we changed the whole thing for the ARPA funds, when I got up and made all kind of questions and asked all kind of questions about how are we going to know how this was done? How are we going to know how this was appropriated? How are we going to know if these are proper people? All the problems that we are now encountering, I brought those things up back when we changed it. We have done a horrible job of handling this money. And I will not be surprised if we end up giving some money back, which I don't want. I put my health on the line back in 2021, trying to meet with the mayor, the comptroller, and then president of the Board of Aldermen, and trying to work with them together to see what we could work together. I believed in the city and wanted to see us prosper. I am saddened by what I see now because we got all these people profiling and styling and profiling and trying to act like we're doing a good job. We are not. We get a D- or a F in what we've done with the ARPA monies, and the people see it. And you can hide and keep getting up and saying how great it is, but nobody fooled. Go out. If you guys are not hearing it, you must not be out in the public that I'm in, because I know I've talked to the alderwoman from the 13th, and she tells me I've talked to the alderwoman from the 11th. The people are not happy with what we're doing. And if we just keep getting up and saying, well, see, it's like this. No, it's not like that. We have done a piss poor job. And anybody who gets up and says anything other than that is wrong. We ought to be ashamed of ourselves, the way we have done this stuff. And we do not want the public to know what's going on. And so you can keep getting up and saying it. And if you can't answer the questions, Alderman from the 8th, you had good questions that they can't answer it because they don't know what you're talking about. They can't get into details because they haven't been given that cheat sheet that they need. So that is the problem, is that we have people doing things that they don't know what they're doing, or that they're purposely doing it. And it is so the public won't get what they're doing. But at the end of the day, there is going to be an accounting, and the accounting is coming soon. And then we will all understand that the public is not happy with what is going on. We should not be acting like this is a good thing to do. The 911 center is, but the movement of all the funds continuously coming back and saying, oh, we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. When some of these things, if you go back and look, we were told we couldn't do them, but we just pushed it through anyway. I remember pushing through, we're gonna put money to take the people on a train or a bus ride or a car ride to get abortions. I'm pro-choice, told you then, don't do that. That is not a good idea because it's gonna get stuck in court and we're gonna have this money sitting up there. And why did you put that in the same funds with other things? Why wouldn't you put that as separate? So when it got stuck in court, it wouldn't be sitting there. But no, we're gonna just do what we wanna do anyway, because we got this foolproof Board of Aldermen that's gonna just do whatever somebody says, and we look silly. And this is ridiculous. And I am not going to support it because it has not been handled right. And I can't even believe anything that people who are carrying it says, because they say one thing and then I look at the paper and I'm looking at people being appropriated money in my ward, the ward that I represent, and I'm looking at addresses that nobody has ever had a business in 20 or 30 years that I've been in office, but they're being appropriated money. That's why people don't believe in us, in our government and what we're doing, and we ought to be ashamed. And I know we're going to have a roll call. I just want to say it. I want a roll call so I can make sure I vote against this nonsense.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board. I want to start by saying to everyone that's listening, please call me. That's what I'm here for. I take my job very seriously. I don't take it for granted. I do my work. I show up for my work. And then when I'm out in the community, I show up for my community with the truth, not with false narratives, not with manipulative, misleading narratives to create confusion and unfortunately continue to cause division between people that if we ever want to move this city forward, we have to be able to work together on. None of the things that I spoke about today, whether I read it or spoke it, are a secret. This isn't the first time it's been shared, and it will continue to be shared as many times as it needs to, because again, that's our responsibility. We have the responsibility to answer the calls. We have the responsibility to answer the questions. If there's a question that wasn't answered on this floor, and I did have an extended conversation with my colleagues after we spoke on the microphones, and we were able to clear some things up. I know sometimes you don't get that when you're watching, but I'm telling you, work is being done. For the city department heads, I apologize, because yes, I do know that you all are doing the work, and you're doing the best you can with your staff, with your workers, with your departments, and I know that you will continue no matter what you hear people think they're saying about the work that you're doing. And if you want to get things done, blasphemy is not the way. When you have a calm spirit and you want to be able to work collectively with others, and you have the data and the facts to show it, and you are open and available as always to show up and respond, then that's what builds the trust in people. And again, I don't take it for granted, not for a second. So with that, I'm asking for you all's favorable consideration and due pass recommendation for Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt Board Bill 126 as amended in committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Ryan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Keys. 12 aye votes, 1 no vote, and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to perfect Board Bill 126 as amended.
Board Bill 104, committee sub, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, and Alderman Cone. An ordinance repealing ordinance number 70924, codified at Chapter 25.74 of the Revised Code of Ordinance of the City of St. Louis, and enacting in lieu thereof a new ordinance to be known as Utility Coordination Policy, providing exemptions for emergency maintenance work.
Madam Clerk, if you could please make sure I'm listed as a co-sponsor as well.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 104, committee substitute.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move to perfect Board Bill 104, committee substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 3rd, that we perfect Board Bill 104, committee substitute. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you so much. This bill has been a work in progress for a number of months. Thank you so much to everyone who's been helping with it so far, especially Alderman Browning, Caitlin Smith, Christian Bishop, Cecilia Boyers. You all did so much work on this. We've met with the utility providers. I think each utility provider at least once. Then there were 4 other meetings with the administration and all of the utility providers as well. I tried to do the math, the number of hours that people spent really digging into this bill, and I really lost count. So what this bill does is it works to prevent the situations that we see on our streets every day, whether it is a repair to a utility cut that is patched with concrete instead of being restored to the regular condition of the street, or whether that's a utility cut that runs blocks and blocks and blocks but doesn't actually fix the lane that it's in. So we end up with just a lot of extra potholes and issues on our streets that could be prevented with a better policy and more expectations from the utility providers. So that's what this bill does in terms of setting those standards. We worked really closely with the utility providers to find ones that worked for everyone, that gave St. Louis a great deal while also making sure it was workable. The streets department has been incredibly helpful in getting this done as well and given a lot of feedback. Before I say anything more, I do have a floor substitute that I would, if possible, make a motion now to move to adopt the floor substitute to Board Bill 104.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 4th, that we adopt floor substitute to Board Bill 104. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You are now recognized on Board Bill 104, floor substitute.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So this floor substitute took even up into the last few days. We've been getting feedback from the various stakeholders just to make sure that this bill is as complete, ready to be implemented as possible on day one. And that was to change some things regarding the word legislation to law. We also have been talking with Alderman Browning's office about a paving and sidewalk plan, so updated the language in the bill to have the same language in there that he has in legislation that he's working on, so that would be consistent throughout. There's a special call out for keyhole cuts, which are these very small cuts that utility providers will occasionally need to make in order to do identification of service lines that is a lot less impactful to the street than other utility cuts. Working through making sure that the fees and fines in this bill match what the Streets Department is already expecting and has publicly available, so that there's not a single dollar that we should expect to not be coming into the city through this bill, as it is the same standards as have been in existence technically within the city of St. Louis. So that is what the update, the floor substitute does. I'm happy to answer any questions on this bill. You all know I could talk forever, so I'm just going to make myself stop talking now.
Alderwoman, do you want to make a motion to perfect the floor substitute?
Thank you so much. I do. I would like to make a motion to perfect Board Bill 104, floor substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we perfect Board Bill 104, floor substitute. Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I just want to, one, make sure that I'm still a co-sponsor on this floor substitute because this is an incredible bill that has taken a lot of work. I think this is an issue that when people drive our streets, they can often identify pretty easily. It often feels like everything wrong with our streets is not necessarily the potholes, which do happen, but most of it is utility cuts that has been unfortunately poorly repaired and is really doing damage to people's cars, is doing damage to our streets, sometimes ruining streets that we've just paid money, taxpayer money to pave. And so this is a very, urgent and difficult problem, but it is something that isn't as easy to solve as you necessarily would have thought. So I just want to thank the Alderwoman from the 1st for putting the effort into this bill. It took a ton of work to meet with the different utility companies, to meet with the administration, to meet with the departments to make sure this is feasible and can actually make a difference. And I think that work has been done covering all those tiny little questions like even what to do with keyhole cuts. I mean, it's way more complicated than you would. But this is a really, really well-written bill, and we hope it can really make a difference out on our streets and give St. Louis the same deal that all of the municipalities around us are getting. So thank you again, Alderwoman, and again, wish to make sure I'm on this.
Madam Clerk, if you can make sure I'm still a co-sponsor as well. Reminder that since we now have a floor substitute, if you were a co-sponsor on it, you need to request to re-add your name. I will do Alderman from the 14th, and then 7, and then 13.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Will the Alderwoman from the 1st yield for questions?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 14th.
Yes.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderwoman, could you just go over again a few changes that were in the floor sub? I'm looking at the email, and I guess I'm not part of the team because I was left off the floor sub email.
Oh, I apologize for that. So if you, starting at the beginning of the bill, we added a definition of keyhole excavation. And then moving through to coordination, item number 4 on that list, changing it to paving and sidewalk plan, just to be, again, similar to what other bills are using to name the paving plan and information shared by the Streets Department in the same way. I added the phrase in the next section about the moratorium, just noting in connection with emergency repair. That was something that was requested by some of the utility companies to make sure that we're noting when there is exceptions to the moratorium for emergency. And then the further on in that category, that same thing, legislation changes to law. That was flagged for us by MSD because they have consent decrees that they have to do by law, but not legislation. So we wanted to make sure that that was noted specifically. Continuing. The one change that I neglected to mention earlier that I should have is changing in Section 6, the adoption of standards. Excavation standards had been listed as Missouri Department of Transportation. Those are hundreds of pages of standards, very specifically calling out excavations in certain parts, and it was sort of confusing for some of the utility providers. And we got the suggestion from, I think, 3 or 4 different utility providers that going with the same types of standards as St. Louis County would make a lot more sense and also help with just regional knowledge for contractors when they're doing work and what they're supposed to be using across the region. And many municipalities that are in St. Louis County, including Olivet, there's a guide here that they provide that's attached that is really helpful for contractors as well. They use St. Louis County standards, so that makes it even easier for the Streets Department to provide that information. Then on the next section of standards, changing to item 1, we wanted to make sure that we kept using the same language throughout. So instead of repaired, we changed to restored and adopted standards. And then we put in the exception for keyhole excavations. There is in this a joint to joint with requirement. So instead of a utility repair being 3/4 of a lane and you're hitting your tire on it or whatever, and it's causing potholes in weird places. It would be the entire joint to joint if it's concrete, or to something that makes sense with in the same way with asphalt as well. So it's just a way to keep the street stronger when there are repairs. But this is just noting that keyhole excavation is very small and is just a very small 12-inch core that's actually taken instead of a trenching. So it's a little bit different. Then number 6 also has the exception for keyhole excavations. Then we changed the fees associated with permitting to match what's on the city's website now for excavation permitting. We wanted to make sure that we weren't inadvertently doing anything that caused a change in how much money was coming into the city when permits are pulled for this category, as well as we'd had a degradation fee that other municipalities have issued, but because the standards of repair that we've put in earlier are more stringent, it made more sense to go with that as the main cost, I suppose, to utilities for doing this work, as opposed to a degradation fee, which may or may not have been applicable depending on the size of the utility provider. So it just seems like a better deal for everyone and something that we could agree on with utility companies as well. Those are the changes that were made between the committee substitute and the floor substitute.
Gotcha. So the the fee section is, because I see that's probably the biggest amount of change that came out of it. A lot of things scratched out, and then a lot of new stuff that was put in. But that's already just city policy to make sure that we're being in line with what we already do.
Yes.
Okay.
That's directly from the city's website when you go and apply for an excavation permit. So yes.
Gotcha. Okay. No, like I say,
The one thing I will note that we did change from what the city's process is we put, when it says a $1,500 deposit, we added the clause refundable 1 year after issuance of the permit and a final inspection. So that way, if the cut begins to fail, that we didn't already issue the deposit.
Okay. Thank you for that. Like I said, I wasn't able to.
I apologize for that, Alderman. I will double check, triple check, quadruple check next time.
Yes, so my feelings are not hurt. I know it wasn't intentional. With that, Madam President, I'd like to be added as a co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Alderwoman Schweitzer, I know how long you've been working on this bill. Alderman Browning, I know how much you've been quarterbacking as well. I know how much you all staff, Caitlin and Christian, have worked hard as well. So I wanted to thank you just for being diligent and having those conversations. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st be willing to yield to an inquiry?
Would the Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 7th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman Schweitzer. I just have 2 questions that came up in a neighborhood meeting. So I just told them I would ask these again so they could be on tape, because I love to tell the community that we can all roll the tapes back. Can you just give a little bit explanation into procedurally and from a constituent perspective how this process will work different now when utility companies wants to do work in our streets, as opposed to how we're doing it now, the status quo way, and with the perfection and final passage of this bill, how it will go?
I appreciate that question a lot. So bare bones, we did put an attachment as an exhibit what we would suggest for a new permit that would be pulled. Right now, the permit that is pulled by a contractor says that they should leave the asphalt, the cut, at 2 inches below grade, and then the city is supposed to come back and put a layer of asphalt over that. That hasn't happened for years. Instead, the city has told them to bring it concrete up to grade, which is why you see those kind of uneven concrete patches around the city. Instead, what we're doing in this bill is, like in other municipalities around us, the utility provider will be responsible for restoring the street. So they are responsible for the correct backfill material, and at the point of time in which it would make more sense, it would be the time for the asphalt layer to be applied. They would be responsible for doing that. So you would see every cut would have either an asphalt or concrete repair, depending on the type of street. There's a lot in this bill that says if there's a cut that would run, for example, down the center of a lane, for blocks and blocks. They would be restoring the entire lane. So it wouldn't be left with a concrete stripe down the street, which causes a lot of degradation to our roads. The standard section goes through every single thing that would be seen. And it is very much, speaking of, what should constituents expect to see, I think one of the most important things about this is that we have laid out the standards as clearly as possible, and there will be a pictorial guide of what it's supposed to look like. So much of our enforcement, as we know, in our city comes from citizens reporting issues. So what I'm hoping comes from this is that there can be citizens who know what it should look like. So if it doesn't look like that, they're able to report it and help with the enforcement of this. But the utility providers know what's in this. They've met multiple times. They should be doing this, just because it's what the law is. But we'll also have the ability for constituents to really know what it should be and should look like. It's as clear as we could possibly make it in the bill.
Thank you, and that's actually a great segue to my next question. Will this, how will this impact, just clarify that you've worked with the Streets Department or soon to be the Transportation Department, and just the way that this will impact their workload and capacity?
Thank you. That's a good question. So this is something that does require a little bit more out in the public information to exist. So, the moratorium will require the Streets Department and the Board of Public Service to make public every street that's been restored, paved, the blocks in the previous 5 years, so the utilities know what they can't work on. It will require them to make public on July 1st the list of the streets inside, street and sidewalk plan that would be expected for at least the next year. It makes it so that they won't be able to issue permits on streets that have met through the that would be part of the moratorium, things like that. It is something that the Streets Director has seen and given feedback on. And I think that there is a knowledge there that it is important to do this work and to do it this way. So I do expect it to be more of a process of coordination, but also because the utility provider is going to be the one doing the restoration, it takes what technically has been the city's job to restore the pavement away and puts it on the shoulders of the utility providers to do.
Thank you. And so in that way, perhaps we'll even save some funds. And
I hope so. I think it'll make it so that our streets stay in better repair for longer. And when there is work on our streets, that they'll look better after that work occurs. One thing that I didn't mention that's really important in this bill too is when utility work is occurring, people should know that the steel plates that are put over it should be bolted or shall be bolted down to the ground, as well as have an asphalt ramping around it, no matter where they're placed, whether it's a sidewalk, bike lane, straight lane of traffic, parking lane, doesn't matter. Someone may need to get over that or traverse that, and we know how damaging that can be to folks' cars. So that's something that they should expect to see as well. And so I really think this will, one, result in streets that look better and need less city funds to repair and restore. Less people fill in potholes if there's less places where potholes are going to form. It will save the city work as well in certain ways that I think are the specific ways we need work saved to make sure that we, again, have the best outcome for everyone.
Thank you. That concludes my questioning. I think that transparency is great. Coordination and collaboration are great for our city. I want to see us do more of that. And with that, I would like to be added as co-sponsor. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Alderwoman from the 13th.
Thank you, Madam President. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st take a question, please?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yields to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 13th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderwoman Schweitzer, thank you for the bill. I think my concern that I have is it sounds great on paper, but I'm just trying to figure out how will the checks and balances be, because I ride my ward and I have found people that are utility companies that were in my ward doing work and had never applied for permits. And so I had to wind up calling streets and calling buildings for them to shut them down and give them a stop order. And so I'm glad that you doing a lot, because you're doing a lot to improve our streets, but I'm just trying to figure out how will the checks and balance go to ensure that this is followed through on, because we do know the street department is struggling with manpower to get people into the workload. So how can we do that?
Thank you, Alderwoman. That's a really good question, and I appreciate you asking. I do think that there is a piece of this in which once we have the standards that this bill would put into place, we will end up with a better result from utility companies when we do issue permits, when there is enforcement. Of course, that enforcement will still rely on people reporting when there are issues that they see in front of their houses or on their block. I think we have an entire city that is reliant on that sort of reporting, for better or for worse. Of course, the streets department needs to have a fully staffed street inspector lineup. They need to have as many as they need, as many as they should have to be able to do this work. But also, I think down to the permit that's issued, that's not what's being followed currently, and I think it's sort of it's not what's on the permit for the concrete, but it's sort of that's what they were told to do, as opposed the contractors were told to bring it to grade with concrete. So I think having different standards that are set and followed, and having that in writing and having it clearly defined is a big step forward for what we have in place right now as a city. And then making that knowledge available to our residents will help with the process overall. Even the one you just described, all things being equal, you still need to report an issue that you see. Now, what the expected resolution would be so much better than what it would have been, what it is now.
Okay, thank you. Then could I be a co-sponsor, please?
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. If the Alderwoman from the 1st would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th?
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Tell me a little bit about this moratorium. So after we get this passed, how will the moratorium work?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So the Streets Department and the Board of Public Service would be responsible for making public a list of the previous 5 years of road restoration, road work, street repaving, things like that had happened on any particular street. It would be not allowed to do utility work on those streets for 5 years after the date of the road work had occurred. There is an exception to the moratorium for emergency repairs. Say you have a water main that breaks and it has to be done and there's no way around it. There is an exception for that in the board bill. There's also some exceptions for, if there's new development that's going on as well, or a new customer that needs to be added and it's sort of a necessity. It also lays out in the board bill that there could be likely more expectations for restoration on that permit holder if they are needing to do work when there is a moratorium on that street.
And the utilities, they came before the committee, so they met with you and they also signed on to this moratorium. Is that true?
Well, I have gotten a few emails from them saying, thanks, we have no further comment, nothing else we're suggesting changing. Whether that would be them coming forward and saying, we support this, just can't wait to do this extra work, I don't know. But they've been there, they know about it, we've worked on it. They've been generally supportive, I think. I think everyone we talked to has said that they agree that the process needs to be more streamlined for expectations. They agree that bringing the street to grade with concrete is not actually good practice for road repair. So, a lot of professional engineers, I think, were just really excited to talk shop for a while on this, and we had a lot of really great discussions.
And when we talk about the utilities, are we talking about gas, sewer, electric,
Yes.
okay, phone, any
Yes,
phone?
so exactly. So you laid out many of them, most of them. We have the definition of utility provider in the bill linked to the definition that is in the Missouri state statute.
And so I want to just give you the reason why I asked about are they signed on. So when we first started doing phone towers, the city had control of cable and where our phone towers were going to be. And so with all that agreement, you know what the utilities did? They went up to Jefferson City and got a whole different agreement. So I just want to warn you of that they were all with us until they weren't with us. And are alleys included in this ordinance at all?
Yeah, any excavation.
Sorry, board bill.
Yes, thank you. Any excavation permit, yes.
Right. And is there any provision or that the utilities, because I didn't see it and maybe I missed it, maybe could file a plan of what they intend to do? They know what they're intending to do or should know what they intend to do with the city. So we would have some reasonable expectations of where they were going. Is that
Yes,
part of it?
I love that question. Thank you, Alderwoman. So the board bill lays out a kind of calendar year of different deadlines for whether it's a utility provider or whether it's the city of St. Louis. January 1st of every calendar year, the utility providers would be responsible for providing a long-term plan for the utility work that they plan to do. The utility providers, by and large, have provided this sort of plan already to the city of St. Louis during the discussions that the administration began with utility providers. I believe it was May or June of this past year. So many of them submitted their first round already by August. The first deadline, just with when this bill will pass, be signed, and then go into law, would actually be for the city, with the July 1 making public of the city's plan. So then quarterly, the submission would be for utilities to update. The city has to ask them for updates. The utility providers can provide those updates, but they've already been incredible at providing their information to the city. So the city has what it needs. As you know, we all put some planning together for how we're going to use St. Louis Works or Ward Capital funds on our streets. So that is already kind of in progress, in motion, but this bill does lay out the expectations on a yearly basis.
And what about the water department, which often has emergencies?
Mm-hmm.
So are they exempted out or are they included? How do we deal with them? Because when something bursts, they're going to have to dig that street up no matter what, if we just paved it yesterday.
Exactly right. And there is that provision for emergency for exactly situations like that. The Water Division worked with us on this bill. They were present in the 4 large group, all the utilities and administration, my office, Michael Browning's office, President's office meetings. They were present for all of those, met with them separately on 2 different occasions in smaller groups as well to run through the bill. One of the things that they'll talk about is that they do already incorporate some of the features of this bill into some of the work that they do. If they do have a water main burst that affects, streets to a point where it would make just so much more sense for them to restore or repave the street, they do incorporate that already, depending on the size of the cut and the issue that is there. And yes, they've been very helpful with working through this bill and making sure that the issues that they have, whether it's an emergency or whether required by law, would be provided for in this bill.
And did you work with any provisions of state law that sometime will override what we're doing? Was there any input from the state or from people who might have known about state law that would prevent us from doing any of this?
So a lot of this bill, the impetus was really looking at the city of Kansas City and some of the, thank you, Janice, some of the changes that they've made to standards. It has not been challenged at a state level yet, and the issues that the utility providers said that they had with those that new law in Kansas City, the lack of clarity, for example, they had some concerns about who was responsible, emergencies, things like that. We flashed through all of that in this bill and made sure that those issues that they had with other cities' legislation were addressed. So I'm hoping that nobody has an issue they haven't told me about, but of course, I guess I can't promise that.
And then, so when they apply to, so they will be applying for a permit to do the different kinds of digs and holes, be it keyholes.
So there are two permits that utility provider, apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay.
I'm just saying, so when they apply, they also at that time pay a deposit?
So accept it, yes. So the short answer is yes, long answer is except where prohibited by state statute. So there are utility providers with $25 million of net assets or more that do not have to pay deposits. It sort of looked at as they're a big enough organization that, they should be able to manage, doing this work and working with the city in a way that they're going to adhere to the laws and uphold the laws. We do want to make sure that we're not just kind of wishing and hoping for compliance, though. And we have in this bill a new section regarding the debarment process. So if a contractor has multiple issues or multiple instances where they have not complied with the standards, they can be debarred and not allowed to go after this sort of work anymore. So they wouldn't be allowed to do the work. So we try to deal with some of those issues there.
We actually have an ordinance on file that when contractors get sued and lose in the city, if they don't pay, then they can't apply for other permits to do other things. So we actually have an ordinance like that. And my other question was, so for these large people who don't pay, or for anybody, so for those who pay a deposit, if they don't do it right, is the thought that then ultimately the city would come out and do it, or would we have another contractor come out and do the work correctly? And
right.
What I mean is billion.
Yeah, I think that would be a case-by-case basis in terms of, the deposit wouldn't be returned to the contractor unless they brought it to standards. So that would be a small, not the $1,500 if they qualify for having to pay the deposit. Certain contractors wouldn't, organizations wouldn't, some wouldn't, but for the ones that would, they would lose their deposit if they didn't do the repair per standards.
And then again, so we don't know if we would then contract that work out to be done correctly, or
I would imagine it could be a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't be able to say a timeline at this time for when that would occur.
And do you know who would make that decision? Would that be the city councilor?
It'd be within the streets department. The streets department would probably end up making the decision for where they're going to expend their resources.
Okay. And for the big people who don't, because we're talking really the big offenders, AT&T, I won't say them specifically, I'll say phone, gas. My streets are so tore up, I've been scared to pave streets, local streets, for a while, because as soon as we thought we were going to pave a street, then we see 2 or 3 different utilities, one behind another. So our streets are just a mess. Right. So for the big utilities that don't have to pay any kind of a deposit, how do we get them? Because we're not going to be able to prevent them, I don't think, from doing work. What was your thought process about how we get them to do the right thing?
That's where I think the debarment process comes in for their contractors. I think we would probably also need to use our bully pulpit at that time to be, not issuing permits to those providers. There's no guarantee of receiving a permit in the city of St. Louis if you apply for one. So the city could definitely choose not to issue permits if there was a history of noncompliance. One of the things that I do think is important, though, is that we're not all stick, no carrot. In this bill, there is a section that lays out if the city does have a plan to repave a street, and it gives the utilities the time before the repaving starts to do their work and be able to have less that they need to do to restore the street. So it would be less expensive for them to get their work done prior to when the city is actually going to repave a street, so that there is that also added incentive of the utility provider wanting to try to match up to the city's schedule for their own benefit.
And I like a lot of what you have. I want to say that whole thing about letting people know that this is what you're getting ready to do. I tried that with LRA and demolitions in my community. I sent a big list of properties because I want to give a shout out to the building division. They got the buildings down, but LRA is a particular problem. And I asked, hey, if you couldn't at least, if you're going to tear these buildings down because they are burned down just about. Why don't you just go out and disconnect the water and the gas, and then when you get to them, I could go ahead and pave my street. I had no agreement at all. I could not get them to work. I want to say your name, Lance Knuckles. I could not get you guys to work with me. It does make sense to plan ahead and have a plan. I appreciate your work. I will be supporting this bill, and thank you for responding and yielding to questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to be added as co-sponsor.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that. Alderman from the 14th.
I'd like to make a motion we embank this board bill.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we embank Board Bill number 104, floor substitute. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Aye.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are now recognized to close on the perfection of Board Bill 104, floor substitute.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you so much to everyone for adding your name as co-sponsor. It means a lot to me that you putting your name on this, and we worked so hard together to really go through the details today. That was great questioning. That was like a fun test at the end of an exam. So I appreciate this again, and I renew my motion. Thank you.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we perfect Board Bill 104, floor substitute. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Board Bill 125, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer. President Green, Alderman Aldridge, Alderman Brown, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Keys. An ordinance requiring property owners to prevent and remediate mold in rental dwelling units, prohibiting an owner of a rental dwelling unit from obtaining a certificate of inspection if mold is present, providing for notice protocols to owners of unit where mold is found, requiring owners to notify tenants of units where mold is found, directing the Department of Health to create materials with information about mold prevention, remediation, and hazards, empowering the building division to enforce this ordinance, imposing penalties for violating this ordinance, providing for an effective date, emergency clause, and a severability clause.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on the perfection of Board Bill 125.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move back to Board Bill 125.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 125. Alderwoman.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This bill really came about because of the number of times that I know I and so many others on this board have gotten complaints from constituents about living in apartment buildings or apartments where they have mold conditions that are unsafe for their family to be in. Yet when we send a building inspector out, unless they can find the cause of the mold, and that cause is a already named building code violation, it's not in and of itself a violation to have mold present, which leaves the tenant in a position where they don't have much rights in that moment to have their homes repaired. Of course, this means that the folks who are the least likely to be able to move or find new lodging end up with the conditions that are unhealthy for them and their families, which exacerbate some of the issues that I think are all concerned about here on the board, including the incredibly high rates of childhood asthma in our communities and health issues that are related to mold that anyone of any generation, especially children and the elderly, are more likely to be susceptible to having harm from. So this bill was really brought from that. Last session, I introduced a board bill around mold, and to be quite frank, I had a conversation with the building division, and they were like, "We can't enforce this." And I was like, well, then I'm not going to move forward with it, because there's no point in me introducing a bill and trying to move something forward that isn't going to have the result that actually ends up with our constituents having healthier homes. So we pulled that bill back. We didn't move it forward out of committee. And then I worked really closely with Cecilia Boyers in the president's office and with the many organizations that organize for tenants in our community, as well as with the realtors who represent so many property owners in the city, as well as the building division and the health department, to make sure that we had a bill that not only was enforceable by the building division, but it also made sense for property owners and provided the information needed to the building division for what to know, what to look for mold, and the health department was involved on how to educate people who were receiving this sort of code issue in their property as to what they can do to fix it, as well as how to look out for mold and prevent it. So tried to hit the issue from all different angles to make sure that it was a bill that would work for everyone, and again end up with a healthier housing stock for our community. I'm happy to take any questions, and I appreciate your time on the bill this morning.
Need further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. If the Alderwoman from the 1st would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. So I am just stunned that sometimes you can assume things. When you tell me that the building division said they couldn't do anything about if they detect mold. So let me understand that again, because I must have misunderstood something. Why would they pass? The whole point of having a conservation district was so that the building division could get inside these places, because they used to just inspect outside a lot of the things. And so if they go in and they find mold, why couldn't they do anything about it? Or
I really appreciate your question, Alderwoman, and that's a really good one. I had a lot of the same questions, because our building code does require the housing stock that's offered to be safe and habitable, which to me means free from mold or other things that could cause health issues. But unfortunately, mold was not explicitly laid out anywhere in the code. What had been laid out in the code is issues that can cause mold, which is what the building division had often been looking for and trying to inspect for whenever they do get a call for mold being present. So they'll look for leaks, they'll look for tuck pointing issues, they'll look for holes in the ceiling or roof, they'll look for the things that would be a code violation, issues in the plumbing, the bathroom, things like that, that could cause excess moisture. However, if they're not able to find any of those issues, they don't explicitly cite for mold. I had, like I said to you earlier in my comments, this really came from my constituents who reach out to me and so many of us saying, I have mold, and I would ask the building division, please go out and inspect. And I have, chains of emails where they get back to me and said, we can't find the source. We have no site here. Mold isn't a citable violation. So a lot of the issues around that were really, what is mold, identifying it, defining it, setting parameters for what to look for, things like that, to make sure that the people who are inspecting for mold also have the knowledge and definitions handy to actually issue the code violation. So that's what we've done with this bill, is put all of those pieces into place, whether it's the definition of mold that we have in the bill, or whether it's the health department providing guidance, or the EPA guidance that shows up on so many surrounding areas and cities across the country, really, that have started trying to make sure that this is an enforceable code violation within their municipalities.
So when you call the building division, then did you follow up with the health department and they couldn't do anything either? I'm just.
Yeah, that's exactly
That's
right.
like.
That's exactly
That
right,
doesn't make
Alderman. Yep.
sense. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying, well, and I do believe you because we have nuisance laws, and then we have people get shot month after month, and the bodies, and they don't find a gunshot or a dead body as a nuisance. Okay, so I think that in this case, I'm not opposed to your bill. I think that we need to look up really hard at the people who are enforcing our ordinances and board bills, because if you find mold and let somebody just brought some mold into a unit and put it there, something caused it. Now, I don't know if it's the landlord who didn't do their part or the tenant, but mold that just doesn't appear because there's not a causation. Would you agree with that?
I do, and that's, if I may, that's why the building division had often just cited, well, they had only just cited for things like that could cause it. We had some experts on mold speak during the hearing that we had on this bill in HUDs recently, and they came and testified, at the point that there is mold physically present, ideally, of course, 100% the underlying cause needs to be fixed as well. But now that the mold is present, it needs to be remediated as well. So this bill not only makes it the citation, but it lays out the process of remediation and works with the health department to make sure that information is available and publicly provided, as well as provided at the time of an inspection or failing due to mold being present. I remember when I was on budget a few years ago, the building division and health department came at the same time, and I was asking them questions about mold, and both really looked at it as the other's responsibility. And so, that kind of back and forth would happen where they might pass the mold violation to the health department. The health department says that's actually got to be cited as a building code violation, and it gets handed back over, and they can't find the underlying cause. And we just wanted to address that issue and identify what time inspections are happening, for occupancy with the building division, having the violation and enforcement placed with them, but having the information and education piece as it should be placed with the health department, so that the two parties are working in tandem to make sure that there's the best outcome possible.
And do you anticipate if the discovery of mold, if it's doing the conservation inspection, that they not pass it and no one is able to move in until they get it cleaned up to a certain standard?
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
But we have the right of reentry with the conservation district. Okay. So what if during the tenant's residency, mold is discovered? What do you anticipate happening?
There's the period of time where they would have, like any other code violation, most of them have a 30-day period where they're allowed to remediate the issue, and then it is re-inspected, or there's some sort of follow-up check that occurs. This allows in the ordinance or the legislation the ability for the building division to issue extensions, for good faith efforts that are happening. So we try to keep it in the process of mold the same as it would be for any other code violation that property owner is handling.
And so, and mold can be caused by landlord, and I see in your bill that you got also that sometimes the tenant can cause it, or if it's the landlord not doing what they're supposed to be. First question, is there any point when the mold is substantial that we would remove the tenants like we do with lead?
I don't have that laid out explicitly in the bill, Alderwoman. If the only place that might be considered in the bill is when the occupancy permit would not be issued for the presence of mold outside of what would be the tenant's responsibility to clean.
But I'm just saying, so what we found for many years about lead is that we had to remove kids sometimes of people and to do the lead remediation because it was so much lead in a lot of these old buildings. So right now we don't anticipate removing a family if it's a large, substantial amount of mold. We anticipate just remediating it and getting it cleaned up.
To clarify, Alderman, very good question. It can be condemned for occupancy if the mold is not remediated, like similar code violations. are some code violations that occur where a property, if it's not remediated for a certain amount of time, it can be condemned for occupancy and remove the occupancy permit in that way.
Okay, so now, and I see in your legislation, because I still think this is a health, whether the building division does it or not, this should always be a health. The health department has way more power than the building division. They can come in and shut you down. So you talk about if the tenant has caused the mold by not doing the things that they're supposed to do and not keeping the shower curtain, or if there is a what is provided if a dehumidifier or humidifier is provided, that they should keep that going. So what happens if the tenant is the cause of the mold?
The bill lays out the areas and conditions in which the tenant could be considered to be the cause of the mold.
Right.
So that is laid out in that way. But you're saying if they're getting an inspection for occupancy and the previous tenant caused it or something?
No. I'm saying, so if it's
It would still be issued as a code violation if it was found to be to violate for presence of mold in that way. It would just depend on who's responsible for clearing it.
So if the tenant is already there and there's mold there, if the tenant calls and says, I have mold and right of reentry, they go in there, and then we determined that it was the tenant that's not doing it. I'm on page 3 of 8, section 3, about tenant's responsibility, that you windows and refrigeration and sink area and everything, shower curtains, keeping all of that clean and dehumidifier running. If it then becomes that the tenant is causing the mold, then do we give a citation, but does that go to the owner or to the tenant, or how does that work?
Really good question. We have, for this section, failure to comply shall not constitute a violation of this chapter, and no citation or fine shall be issued to the tenant. So that's not part of it. It's just not something that the owner can be cited for, if that makes sense.
Okay, and I read that it said no citation or fine shall be issued to the tenant. But if you're caught, so I'm a landlord, I've said this often, if tenants are causing that, in the landlord, well, because if I'm the landlord, if you're causing it, then you're going to get, I'm going to charge you if I have to keep coming back because you're not.
Sure.
But we don't, right.
That would be something that would be handled with the owner of the property and the tenant internally. But
I thought, and this is where
if I misspoke, I apologize, but that is the correct thing is that the citation is not issued to the tenant.
I understand, but would the citation be it's still issued to the owner is one of my questions, even though the tenant is causing it, because it still is mold.
Because it's saying failure to comply with the section shall not constitute a violation of the chapter. So even then it goes on to say, and no citation or fine shall be issued to the tenant. So the mold caused here does not end up being a citation to the owner, if that makes sense.
Okay. It does, but I'm just saying, ultimately, if mold is, which I think is a health risk, and if I knew about it as a landlord, I would go and clean it up, and I would write up a letter to the tenant saying, this is how it's being caused, and therefore you need to stop doing this. And it would be, that would be in my lease saying, if you keep violating this, I can't keep you here. But in the meantime, I don't want children or other people exposed to mold.
Sure.
So I'm going to support your bill, but I want something more.
Okay.
To protect me as a landlord. I want somebody to be cited and to be made to keep it up, I guess is what I'm saying, and to clean it up, because we can't just leave it there. Sometimes people are irresponsible around their children.
Sure.
Okay.
And I can imagine that. Sorry, Alderman. Go ahead.
That's right. No, I'm just saying, I don't want children to be there still getting exposed because somebody is doing something wrong. So as a landlord, I wouldn't even have a problem saying, I get a citation saying, look, we know you're not doing it, but your tenant has to stop, because I have that relationship with that tenant. And I would then send them a letter saying, this is what I got from the city, and you have to keep this clean or you won't be able to stay here, because I don't want their children exposed to that. But I hear what you're saying. You're not trying to punish the landlord for something the tenant does, but we don't want kids exposed to this. So, okay, I want to talk to the health commissioner, because I still can't believe that the health commissioner can't go in there and say mold is a health problem and you will get this cleaned up or we will shut this down. But I take your word at that, because I'm just shocked still that the building division couldn't find a way to say that they didn't pass it. So I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Alderwoman from the 13th.
Thank you, Madam President and the board. Would the Alderwoman from the 1st take a question, please?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 13th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Alderwoman Spicer, I heard what Alderwoman Tyus was talking about with the conservation, and I guess mine is on another level because I have a lot of housing authority properties in my ward. And so they are being inspected for, Section 8, but technically, and I know a couple of them that have mold in those units, and they're passing them. So how are we handling that? And that's a big concern to me.
Right, that's a good question. So this doesn't affect Section 8 inspections, but does affect building inspections. So when the city goes out and inspects those buildings, which the city can, they would not pass it.
Okay. And so if they do, because as Alderwoman Tyus has stated, and I have gone through that before with the building inspection, and then people will say, well, they passed, that we got the occupancy passed. And my question is, how did they pass the occupancy? And I know it's issues in that building, and mold was one of them. So then it's back to what an Alderwoman from the 10th has said. Then I'm doing the legwork because I'm the one that's responding back to building, talking to the health department and asking, why is this being passed? And it shouldn't be. And so now I have to send them back into that building and say, no, you have to correct this because I know what's going on. So with this bill, especially with mold, and I'm in agreement with the Alderwoman from the 12th, now we're talking about people's health, because I was a victim of on my job that had mold in my office, and I kept getting sick every year, and it impacted my lungs because they kept saying I had a bronchial infection. And the doctor finally said, is it mold over there? And my whole office had mold all in the office. So they took me off from work.
Thank you.
They had to remove me from that area. And before I could go back to clear it of the mold. So how would we handle this with the housing authority? I guess that's just because I have acquired a lot of those properties.
Thank you, Alderwoman. That's a good question. Any time that once this passes and goes into effect, the mold would then be on the books as a code violation in the city of St. Louis. So a tenant with those properties could say they want through CSB now, they could file a CSB request for an interior building inspection for interior building code violations, and mold would then be one that the building division could cite on. And then anytime there is a new tenant and the occupancy permit, there's another occupancy inspection due, this would again be an issue that could be cited on, and they should not be issuing the occupancy permit unless it's addressed. I'm not going to say that there'll never be any mistakes or things that are missed, whether it's mold or any number of code violations the city has on its books, but this would be one where it would be then on the books in the city of St. Louis as a code violation that needs to be part of the inspection that can allow someone to lose their occupancy permit, and just gives a lot more, the only enforcement abilities now to the building division to actually deal with this issue. So hopefully when you make those sorts of calls in the future, this legislation will help make sure that tenant is able to be provided with a mold-free living unit.
Okay, and thank you. And so I guess right now they're not going to enforce it to that extent. And I'll be probably doing the calls until it's passed and registered. But that's what I was just concerned about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
I would like to make a motion that we embank this bill.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we bank Board Bill 125. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board Bill 125 is now embanked. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, and thank you all again for adding your name as co-sponsors. That means a lot to me. I know it'll mean a lot to people who have been working so hard to get this bill through so that they can live in safe apartments, safe units going forward once this is implemented with around mold. So with that, I renew my motion. Thank you.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we perfect Board Bill 125. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Report of Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to suspend the rules for the purpose of moving Board Bill 126 as amended from the perfection calendar to the regular third reading final passage of board bills calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bill 126 as amended from perfection calendar to the regular third reading and final passage of board bills calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of moving Board Bill 126 as amended from the perfection calendar to the regular third reading final passage of board bills calendar. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Boyd. 12 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th. If you place Board Bill 126 as amended on the regular third reading and final passage of.
So noted.
Report of engrossment.
Board Bill 129, 130, 119, Committee Sub, 113, 120 as amended, and Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
Third reading and final passage board bills consent.
Board Bill 129, 130, 119, Committee Sub, 113, and Board Bill 120 as amended.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
13 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading and final passage of board bills.
Board Bill 126 as amended in committee, sponsored by Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, President Green, Alderman Narayan, Alderman Cone, Alderwoman Schweitzer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderman Aldrich, and Alderwoman Keys, and President Green. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment. Amending ordinance number 71393, 71494, 71554, 71555, 71591, 71592, 71650, 71841, and ordinance number 71864 by reappropriating certain amounts specified herein, an aggregated amount of $8,909,998.58 for purposes with an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 126 as amended in committee. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board, and for the public that's watching. The only reason that we're doing this way is because we, in communication with our Director of Board of Public Service, know that if we go ahead and third read and finally pass this, he is ready to go ahead and execute contracts that have been, quite frankly, held up in the legislative process thus far. That's not a bad thing. This is an important part. But now we have an opportunity to move it forward. And so, again, that's the only reason why we're doing it this way. I did want to respectfully answer some of the discussion that me and my colleague had after our interaction on the microphone. And just to give some clarity on the transparency portal, I was heard from that department, the compliance that does that, and they want to make sure that the public is aware that this is a partnership between the Comptroller's Office and city departments, and that multiple entities sign off prior to getting the data ready, then going to transmit it to the compliance team. And then it goes through a point of POS, and then it gets appropriately designated to the appropriate purpose. And so I think for us, our frustration comes in what we hear down here in committee of where it's been or what money's doing. But the compliance piece and the communication with all of the entities that go into place to make that transparency portal come together is where the gap is. Again, no fault, you spoke that in your comments, no fault of us down here. But we are doing our due diligence and are always available. As I said, anyone can call me anytime to follow up on anything specifically within these contracts that we do in HUDs or any other contracts that we do here that have to go through that transparency portal in the different departments. We all have access to all the department heads. We all have access, again, to the different offices that go into the compliance for the transparency portal. So the frustration is there, but the little extra work, I guess if we have specific questions, and I appreciate them coming up today. Thank you again, Alderwoman Spencer. We can do our due diligence on the back end with that. So again, I'm asking for my colleagues to hear in our continued collective work to move Board Bill 126 as amended forward today so that BPS can go ahead today. They are ready to execute contracts for our Public Safety Access Point 911 Center. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, first of all, it is not true that the things did not get done because of the legislative process. The legislative process is the Board of Aldermen. We passed the board bills. They were signed by the president and then signed into law by the mayor. The process happened at the executive branch part. It did not happen at the legislative process. Whatever didn't get done, once we pass ordinances, we do not have the ability, I want people to understand this, to get out and make the things happen, okay? If we pass a speeding law, if we don't have police officers to implement the speeding law, the Board of Aldermen cannot get out there and slow the people down and give them tickets. Now, I will say the current alderwoman of the 8th had enough moxie that when she couldn't get a stop sign put up, she actually did go years ago, and she can tell you about that, and I think put up her own stop sign because she couldn't get it done. But anything that didn't get done was not through the legislative process. That is not true. And the fact about that, if you ask questions, you'll get answers, that also is not true. The comptroller recently requested information from over SLDC, or was denied the information. And that is just unheard of, that she would be denied the information. I have asked as a chair of a committee for information, and it has been held up and denied and promised, and I still got the emails, promised over and over, get it, and you don't get it. So this fairy tale of, oh, the members of the Board of Aldermen can ask for things and we get it, that's not true. For one thing, we will be getting the reports that are required yearly from every department about what is going on. That is part of our charter. Most people don't do it. Not only have I talked about it, the alderman from the 3rd has talked about it. We don't get them. So that thing of a pie in the sky, oh, you just got to ask and it'll be given, is just not true. Again, the legislative process did not hold this up. This was something that was done at the executive level. They need to take responsibility for it. The people who work for the executive level are the 14 directors who, when the mayor gets in, they get to appoint. I'm sorry, it's only 13 because the marshal right now doesn't get appointed because we control our police. If they take our police back, it'll kick back in, and we also be able to, the mayor will be able to appoint a marshal, but it is not the executive level. And again, it was a lot of things that didn't need to happen, of changing the ordinances over and over, moving things around, passing ordinances that made no sense, were never going to be able to be done, that we are now at the last minute pouring the money into something, saying we got to do this so we can get this money spent. Somebody needs to be held responsible for it. It is not the Board of Aldermen. And you can vote for this if you want to, but I will not be voting for it. And I will not be taking the responsibility for what didn't happen at the executive level. And during Streets Department, and the alderwoman from the 1st knows this, and the alderwoman from the 13th, because they were on my committee. And we brought people in all the time and one of them spoke to holding things up, waiting for certain things to happen from the mayor's office. So don't say that it is the legislative process. It is not. And also the ability and gall to act like this transparency is so clear and easy. If you just do it, if you just call people, then they will give you. No, they won't. They'll hold it. They'll try not to do it. They don't want to hear from not only the alderman, they don't want to hear from the comptroller, who's been at her job for 30 some odd years and has kept our credit at a stellar rate. If it was not for the comptroller, we would have a terrible credit rating. But I want to thank her for all the hard work and for her having the nerves to speak to power when it's wrong, and to talk about conflict of interest and appearance of improprieties, because these are things that are happening now. And this board who came in with all of this transparency, what is it, Proposition R or S, I can't remember which one. We were going to make sure we disclose everything, and we're going to be transparent, and we were not going to do the things from the prior administration. That has not happened. And this is a result. What we're doing now, 126A as amended in committee, is a result of not doing things properly and not following through. And if we're doing this, when we got this money in 2001, and we're now about to be in 2025, we're having to reappropriate and change the money because it didn't get spent. It wasn't anything, not one person at this Board of Aldermen was the fault, except for maybe the person who changed the ordinance and sponsored it in the first place. But it is not the members of the Board of Aldermen's responsibility to carry out ordinances once they are passed. It is part of the mayoral administration. If it didn't get done, they should claim the fault, not us. And this is not going to be a good look to take money away from things that should have got done because we sat on it. And for those reasons, I will continue to oppose it and continue to dispute the rumors or the innuendos about, oh, you just not doing the work and you just not reading. I read every piece of legislation that comes through here. If many of you all do not, we know that. I read the legislation, and I follow up on the legislation. And you don't have to be in committee to read the legislation. You do have to have some ability to understand what the legislation says. And so I'll question if some of us do, because we have a pat little speech that we sit on the floor or stand on the floor and give out as, and see, if you would just do this, and it just doesn't work like that. And it's not going to work like that unless you fight and push back and make it happen. And oftentimes it means that we have to have lawsuits filed against us. And then we can't do the things that we pass a law. We pass laws that we don't follow the law of how we're supposed to pass them. And just because we think we can, we do it, and then we get in trouble. This is a mistake to do this, not to give the money to the call center. That's a good thing. It would also be a good thing if we paid our employees the amount of money so that we would have employees that could work the call center, and that we could have police that will respond, and fire members and emergency people. So having this big fancy call center and we don't have the employees to work it is not going to fix the problem. We're going to have to do some groundwork and put the boots on the ground, and we're going to have to stop passing things along and not pass legislation and then sit on it and then try to act like somebody else is at fault because we didn't get it done. It wasn't executed at the executive level. And we should not be trying to blame other people. And the things that have been going on at this Board of Aldermen has not been good legislation. And I stand adamantly opposed to this because of the way it was done. And now we are having to move money around to hurry up and spend it before we lose it.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I wanted to rise in support of this board bill, and also to all my colleagues that are down on the floor. We have the second group of young folks from Lift a Life Academy. We all can just give them a wave as they're listening to how things are, how laws and things are being made. But getting back on topic, I do want to say I support this. I do understand some concerns of like the process and how, you know, some of these things have happened and rolled out, and a lot of things that played out when it comes to the ARPA funds before I was elected, others were down at the board. But when it does come to this bill and the remaining money, I do think this is just a great example of us as a city and us as at least the Board of Aldermen making it very clear, not only do we support our first responders, because currently when you call 911, you may be trying to call to get police and like fire picks up, or you call, you're trying to get EMT and like police pickup. So to have them all in one house, I think is going to be very beneficial. As the chairman of public safety stated, and to serve as his vice chair over the last year and a half, we've had countless times where the public safety director has come into public safety and talked about how you know, our 911 call system or just calling into 911 hasn't always been perfect. And over the last few months, they've really worked really hard to bring up the call rate up to a place that is a lot better. And I think they want to get even better from there. So I think this is by passing this, at least this part of the ARPA funds, is sending a strong signal that we also care about safety when it comes to our residents in the city of St. Louis. No matter you north, south, east, west, midtown, I think we all share the concern of, you know, constituents calling us from what we can do, at least from an alderman, calling us saying, hey, the 911 system is bad. So hopefully this, the $8 million and change can be a huge help to making our 911 call system better. And again, thank the young people up in the gallery for coming down to the board today.
Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to thank the Alderwoman from the 12th for reminding me of the worst photo that was ever taken of me by the St. Louis media, which was me installing that stop sign, which I did do before a lack of response from, at the time, the street department being willing to put in a stop sign to prevent people from going and driving into a school playground, which was at a school district in my neighborhood and in my ward at the time. That stop sign was eventually put in officially by the city of St. Louis and is still crooked. But that being said, I also wanted to expound a bit on the Alderwoman's point that while department heads really should be responsive to the Board of Aldermen, many times they're not. In fact, right now, was sent an email just yesterday to Neil Richardson, the director of SLDC, asking again for the umpth time for an accounting of the $3.7 million this Board of Aldermen allocated to SLDC to administer the North City grant funds. Still have not received an email back from that department head, but was glad to get some coloration on the accounting of those funds from Noelle Pfeffer, who heads up CDA. But that being said, I mean, months later, as an alderperson, as a former board member of SLDC, was waiting weeks, months to get a response and some basic accounting on federal funds that we, the legislative body, granted to SLDC by way of CDA to administer $37 million of federal funds that were awarded to the city of St. Louis. So there are many instances in which this body, members of the Board of Aldermen, do not get responses from department heads, not just on funding, not just on issues, but on street paving, on other things, on issues that we, as oftentimes the delivery mechanism of city services for our citizens, are responsible for responding to residents on matters of. So I just want to make it very clear that while we should have access and be to a responsive set of city departments, that is not always the case, and it does put us as the direct line of defense for city services in an unfortunate position. But again, Alderwoman, thank you for reminding me of that truly awful photo and that fun day down in Marine Villa installing my own stop sign, which, by the way, was not made out of cardboard. It was a legit one that I bought on Craigslist. Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Just in response to the Alderwoman from the 8th comment, I did want to say that she did include me on that email that she sent to SLDC and CC'd me in it. And I just want to clarify for the record that after you sent the email and CC'd me asking that information, I actually called Neil and called Director Richardson and asked him for that information. And then we also had a conversation with Noelle. So I just wanted to make it clear on the record, not referencing anything else. I wasn't there, but in that exchange, Mr. Richardson was responsive and did encourage Noelle to go ahead and get a response to you in that email. I just wanted to make sure we put that clear on the record. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 8th.
Thank you, Madam President, and I appreciate that clarification. The 7th, it shouldn't take personal relationships or favoritism to some alderpersons to get responses of that nature. I think it should be very clear how we're spending those. I do appreciate and I'm grateful that we have some level of accounting of those funds at this point, but as you saw from the email, it was not a clear indication of all those funds, and it really shouldn't have been 2 months later, and it shouldn't have required a phone call from one of my colleagues to get us that. Thank you, Madam President.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Okay, yes, agree, but I wouldn't call it favoritism.
You do need to still say thank you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Yeah. I do want to clarify, I wouldn't call that favoritism. If you CC me in an email and I'm the new SLDC board appointee, and I get
Are you asking her to inquire?
No, I'm just saying that I just wanted to clarify that it's not, I wouldn't call that instant favoritism. I actually think in that case, I appreciated him working with me, and I think he was trying to respond. Again, I'm not commenting on any previous communication or any other issues with departmental responses, just that specific instance. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, that's exactly what I would call favoritism, because as I recall, the Alderwoman from the 8th was a board member before that. But it does not even take any of that. We have a charter that specifically speaks to our ability to get information. And we don't get it because we don't go to court and make people give it to us. We should not have to. And that charter amendment was made in 2003, and I'll send it to all of you all, because the former president of Board of Aldermen, which was Jim Shrewsbury from the 16th, got tired of the members of the Board of Aldermen trying to get information and not getting it. Not nearly like it is now, because now I know that we were in heaven back then, because we got about 90% of what we asked for, but there were still some people who tried not to give it. But I exactly call it favoritism when one current board member, just became a board member, has to call and say, hey, you need to give that to her, because the Alderwoman of the 8th they absolutely deserve to get it as a former board member and as a member of the Board of Aldermen. And she should not have me or anybody else call. And shame on you, Director Richardson, who I have been somebody who's trying to make shame if you didn't give it to her.
Alderman from the 14th, please state your point of order.
We're not on board. We're not talking about Board Bill 126 at the moment. We've started talking about SLDC and Director Richardson. The board bill that is in front of us is ARPA funds to go to the Call 911 Center. I think, honestly, all three speakers have gotten off topic from sledgehammers and stop signs. That has nothing to do with this board bill to SLDC. So please, if we can get back to Board Bill 126. Thank you.
Point taken. If speakers could please make sure that you stay on the topic of Board Bill 126 as amended in committee. Alderwoman from the 12th, you can proceed.
Oh, we had all finished. I'm finished because we do know it was favored. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized to close.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board. Just for a couple of things for clarity, I'm not sure who said anything about streets. I didn't say anything about streets. And as it relates to the legislative process, when I spoke about why we are moving, why we suspended the rules, for us to be able to move, for us to be able to third read and finally pass this, that is legislative process because it has to go through that in order for our Director of Board of Public Service, Rich Bradley, to be able to sign the contracts that are on his table, that are on his desk, to move forward with our 911 call center. So those were the only references I made. Again, I'm always available for questions, for clarity, to make sure that you fully understand the process and how we move legislation down here. And with that, I renew my motion that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 126 as amended in committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 126 as amended in committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus.
No.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Boyd. 11 aye votes and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to third reading and finally pass Board Bill 126 as amended in committee. Reported, the finally passed and signed by the President.
Board Bill 129, 130, 119 committee sub, 113, 120 as amended, 126 as amended in committee.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix her signature here at the end that these may become law. First reading of resolutions in reference to committees.
Resolution 206, sponsored by Alderwoman Sanier, Arbolo Community LLC in the City of St. Louis, enhance Enterprise Zone.
Alderwoman from the 7th, you are recognized on the first reading of Resolution 206.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I would like to ask for Resolution 206 to be sent to the HUD's committee.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 14th, that we send Resolution 206 to the HUD's committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of first reading of resolutions in reference to committee.
Second reading of resolutions, committee reports and adoptions.
Resolution 195, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, approval of the 2015 Tower Grove Concerned Citizen Special Business District budget.
Alderwoman from the 6th, you are recognized on the second reading of Resolution 195.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to request unanimous consent on Resolution 5.
Hearing no objection, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to adopt Resolution 195.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we adopt Resolution number 195. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Report from the HUD's Committee, the appointment of Kevin Liddy to the St. Louis Port Authority.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on Mayor Jones' appointment to the St. Louis Port Authority.
Thank you so much, Madam President, members of the board. One of the other many great things we get to do in committee is interview and approve board appointments. And the St. Louis Port Authority makes some very big decisions in the city of St. Louis, and Mr. Liddy was so inspiring in committee this week. He came, he went into his extensive background, but more importantly, his will to serve. You know, when you serve on these boards, they're voluntary basis, so you have to have a passion for that kind of work to really be impactful and effective in. And so we thank Mr. Liddy for his willingness to serve, for his commitment to the city, and again, his his appointment to the St. Louis Port Authority.
Would you like to make a motion?
So I make the motion that we approve the mayor's appointment, Mr. Liddy. I'm standing in the gap for my colleague, colleague Alderman Oldenburg here. So you see, I got you, Alderman. Mr. Liddy on his appointments, the mayor's appointment rather, to the St. Louis Port Authority.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we approve Mayor Jones' appointment to the St. Louis Port Authority. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
We can dispense with line item 23, announcements.
Tuesday, December 10th, Transportation and Commerce will have a meeting in the Kennedy Room at 9 a.m. HUDs will have a meeting in the Kennedy Room at 11 a.m. Wednesday, December the 11th, Special Committee on Special Taxing District will have a committee hearing in the Kennedy Room at 12 p.m. Public Safety will have a committee hearing in the Kennedy Room at 2 p.m. Public Infrastructure will have a committee hearing in the Kennedy Room at 3:30 p.m. Thursday, December 12th, Public Safety will have a committee hearing in the Kennedy Room at 2 p.m. Friday, December 13th, 2024, Full Board meeting in the Chambers at 10 a.m. That's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Just a couple announcements as we are out of turkey season into Santa Claus season. So in 14th Ward this Sunday, if anybody want to join us, we will be doing 14th Ward annual Christmas parade. We will start at 1428 Salisbury. We're going to take off around 12 o'clock. We'll drive throughout the whole 14th from 12 to 3 p.m. It's in partnership with Communities First, myself, the 14th Ward Committee Woman Lucinda Frazier, and local law enforcement who will also be making sure as we drive through with a Santa and a sleigh that nobody gets hurt. Also, so Saturday, December the 14th, from 3 to 7 in Hyde Park, we will be having our not only walk through, but we'll be lighting up Christmas trees in Hyde Park. So if you'd like to come out, you can take pictures with Santa and some elves. And I'm short, but I promise I will not be an elf. We'll have some food. We got some hot chocolate, some cookies, some sing-alongs, and some sleigh rides. And then the next day, December 15th, if you haven't signed up already, at Herbert Hoover Boys and Girls Clubs from 12 to 3. That's in the 11th Ward. We appreciate the Alderwoman from the Elevator 11 for always working with her partners, neighbors of the 14th Ward. We will be having our 14th annual toy giveaway that is also, again, put on by Communities First. So please come on out to all those holiday events. We're just trying to light up the 14th Ward a little bit more. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to wish my legislative aide friend, Bree Bowen, a happy birthday tomorrow. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So we've got a big weekend coming up in the 11th Ward tomorrow. So the mayor will be at the O'Fallon Rec Center for her community meeting tomorrow, I think starting at 10 o'clock or 10:30. That information is on my Facebook and next door. At 1 o'clock, there will be a meeting at the Wesley House for the Penrose Association. And then at 3:15, the mayor's coming back for a tree lighting ceremony. So there'll be Santa, there'll be cocoa and other activities, and they're going to have chestnuts roasted on an open fire. There you go, I'm singing for you. So, but also at 5:15 is when we're gonna light up the tree. So please put this on your schedule. This is a calendar alert to please join us for all of the things happening tomorrow in the 11th Ward. We look forward to seeing you there.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We've got quite a busy week ahead of us in the 3rd Ward. We have the Dutchtown Merry Menagerie that's happening on Sunday, December 8th. It starts at noon. It's taking place at the Neighborhood Innovation Center, which is at 3207 Merrimack. We also have on Tuesday, the Graveway Park Neighborhood Community Christmas Carnival is happening at the Rita Ford Community Center over at Cherokee in California. And then on Wednesday, December 11th, we have the Winter Wonderland, which is also happening at the Neighborhood Innovation Center starting at noon.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to echo the Rita Ford Community Center event that's happening. We have a Santa there, so hope to see you there. But also want to echo that we have Cherokee Print Bazaar happening tomorrow on Saturday. This year we will have over 180 artists who will have amazing art available for you to purchase that is not even limited to just the amazing printing, but also beautiful fabrics and just the well-known creative artistry that Cherokee is known for will be on display. So come by, get a drink, get some art. It will be going from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. There'll be some live music and entertainment. Just an opportunity to really prepare for the holidays, get some Christmas gifts, and support our small business community.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Sorry that I missed this one. Also, there's a lot of holiday things happening. Also, Saturday and this Sunday, we will have the Holiday House, which will be at Holy Trinity's Church, which is off 3519 North 14th Street. If you are looking for gifts, family members, if they're looking for gifts for kids, please come by. There'll be plenty of gifts. We'll have fresh baked cookies and hot chocolate, decorated gingerbread houses, craft colors. There'll be reindeers. We will have chestnuts roasting on an open fire. And also the mayor will be around there that Saturday around 12:30. So please come out. We know that this time gets a little difficult for families who may be a little unfortunate that may not be able to get a gift, but it will be a whole holiday house for the next 2 days. So thank you so much.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
And the last second announcement. Tomorrow, the Tower Grove South Neighborhood Association will be having a holiday party from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at 3221 Oak Hill Avenue. They're having a cookie exchange, raffling games, so that will be fun. And then Sunday afternoon, Compton Hill will be having a progressive holiday dinner.
Alderwoman from the 11th.
I apologize. I did forget one more thing. So on Sunday, they will celebrate, or our city, as well as the family of Captain Wendell Pruitt, will celebrate the 80th anniversary of his return home after flying over 70 missions. And so that will be at the Soldiers Memorial at 2 p.m. So if you are available, please come out and celebrate this with the family. As you may know, Pruitt-Igoe is partially named after Captain Wendell Pruitt. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 10th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have an announcement. I should have made it earlier, special guests, because they are absolutely special guests to the city of St. Louis. But I want to announce and thank for the invitation from WashU last night. I serve as WashU's Alder Lady too, and last night I was invited by the Olin Business School for the cohort of the Diversity and Leadership. Leon Jackson and his team, members from the community, staff from the MBA, EMBA, and doctoral program, the professor of practice, Giselle Marcus, to be able to not only tell them, but show them how much I love my job and how much I love the city of St. Louis. So thank you again for that invitation. Welcome again. I hope you all are having a great time doing your events and your classes this weekend. Have a great time tonight, and I hope to see you back in STL soon.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, we need to excuse the alderman from the 5th for necessary absence.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we excuse the Alderperson from the 5th for necessary absence. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we adjourn until December 13th, 2024 in the Board of Aldermen chambers.
Second. It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we adjourn until Friday, December 13th, 2024 in the Board of Aldermen chambers. I mean, we can all stay here until, if you really want.
Roll call.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.